His family was away for months. His fiancé saw her chance. She pushed his wheelchair straight into the pool and walked away laughing, daring him to survive. Nobody was home. Nobody except the nurse hired just days ago, a woman who wasn't even supposed to be there that night. What she did changed everything. If you believe that real love is never about money, type yes in the comments right now. And if you haven't already, hit that follow button, because this story is going to break your heart before it heals it. My name is Nadia, and this is what happened the summer I almost lost everything trying to save a man I barely knew. I still remember the first day I walked through those gates. I had never seen a house like that in my whole life. It didn't even look real. Tall white walls, a driveway longer than my whole street back home, and a garden so green it looked painted. I stood there for a second just breathing it in because 3 days earlier I didn't even know if I'd have a job that week. I had just finished my nursing contract at a small clinic and money was tight, real tight. So when the agency called and said a private family needed a live-in nurse for a few months while they traveled, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I just said yes. They told me his name was Elijah Grant, 36 years old. Owned half the buildings downtown, according to the driver who picked me up. 2 years before, he'd been in a car accident that took the use of his legs. That's all they told me. Nobody warned me about the rest. The house felt cold the moment I stepped inside, and I don't mean the air conditioning. I mean the kind of cold that comes from silence, from people who live in the same house but don't really live together. His family, I found out, had already left for an extended business trip overseas, something about expanding the company into new markets. They'd be gone for months. So it was just going to be him, a few staff members who came and went, and his fiancée, a woman named Bianca, who I met within the first hour and instantly felt something strange about, though I couldn't put my finger on why yet. Elijah didn't even look at me the first time we spoke. He was sitting by the window in his wheelchair, staring out at nothing, and when I introduced myself, he just said, "Another one," like I was the fifth nurse that month. Maybe I was. I later found out he'd gone through nurses fast, not because he was cruel, but because he didn't want anyone around long enough to actually see him. Not the real him, the tired him, the lonely him. I didn't take it personally. I've worked with enough patients to know that pain makes people push others away before those others get the chance to leave first. So I just did my job. I checked his vitals, made sure his medication schedule was right, helped him with his physical therapy exercises even when he groaned through every single one. I didn't try to be his friend. I didn't try to fix him. I just showed up every single day and did what I was there to do. It took almost 2 weeks before he said more than 3 words to me in a row. I remember it was a Tuesday evening, and I was adjusting his blanket before I left for the night, and out of nowhere he asked me, "Why do you actually care?" I looked at him a little confused, and he continued, "Every nurse before you just did the job and left. You ask me questions, you remember what I like. Why?" And I told him the truth. I said, "Because you're still a person, even in that chair. Doesn't cost me anything extra to remember you like your tea without sugar." He didn't say anything back that night, but something in his face softened, just a little, like a door cracking open that had been shut for a long, long time. From that point on, things started to change slowly, the way real trust always does. He started talking more. He told me about the accident, how one wrong turn on a rainy night took away his ability to walk and in some ways his ability to trust anyone around him. He told me how everyone treated him differently after that. Some people pitied him. Some people got greedy around him, thinking his money could somehow fix what medicine couldn't. And then there was Bianca. He told me they'd been together before the accident and that she stayed after it happened, which everyone praised her for. She stayed when she didn't have to, he said one night, almost like he was trying to convince himself it meant something real. But even as he said it, I noticed how his eyes didn't light up the way they should have when talking about someone he loved. I started noticing things too, small things at first. The way Bianca would smile sweetly in front of guests or staff, but the second they were alone, her voice would turn sharp, impatient, almost annoyed by his presence. She would sigh when he asked for help. She would disappear for hours, sometimes days, and come back with new jewelry, new bags, never once asking how his physical therapy was going. And every single time I was in the room with him, laughing gently at something small or helping him stretch his legs, I would catch her watching us from the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. I didn't think much of it at first. I told myself it wasn't my business. I was just there to do my job and go home. But it's hard not to notice pain sitting right next to you every day, and it's even harder not to feel something when you watch someone slowly come back to life in front of you. One evening, we sat out on the back terrace, just the two of us, because Bianca was out again, this time at some spa retreat for the weekend. Elijah looked at the sunset for a long time before he said, "You know, this is the first summer in 2 years I haven't dreaded waking up." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled and kept adjusting his leg brace. But inside, my chest felt tight because I realized I looked forward to seeing him too. Not because of his money, not because of the house. Just because somehow in this cold mansion full of empty rooms, there was a real person in there trying so hard to feel human again. Bianca noticed the shift too, and she didn't like it one bit. It started with small comments. Isn't the nurse getting a little too comfortable? She'd say to the housekeeper, loud enough for me to hear. Then it became direct. One afternoon, she cornered me in the hallway and told me, flat out, that I needed to remember my place. I told her calmly that I was simply doing my job, caring for my patient the way I was trained to. She just stared at me, that fake smile stretched tight across her face, and said, just make sure that's all it stays as. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked away because I needed this job and I wasn't about to let pride cost me my paycheck. But something about the way she said it stuck with me. It felt less like jealousy and more like a warning. A few nights later, everything changed. It was a Thursday, I remember, because it was my scheduled evening off, but I'd forgotten one of my files at the house and decided to swing by quickly before heading home. The staff had already left for the day, it being a lighter shift with the family gone, and the house was unusually quiet when I pulled back into the driveway. I figured Elijah was already asleep, so I let myself in through the side entrance the way I always did, planning to grab my folder and leave without disturbing anyone. That's when I heard it. A splash followed by a voice yelling, choking, gasping for air. I ran toward the back of the house so fast I didn't even think, my heart slamming against my ribs. And when I came around the corner to the pool area, what I saw made my whole body go cold. Elijah was in the water, his wheelchair sinking beside him, his arms flailing weakly as he struggled to keep his head above the surface. And standing at the edge of the pool, arms crossed, watching him drown, was Bianca. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't screaming for help, she was smiling. Let's see how you save yourself now, she said, her voice calm, almost amused, like she was watching a show. And then, as if she'd just remembered an appointment, she turned around, straightened her dress, and walked away, leaving him there to die. I didn't even think. I dropped everything I was holding and ran straight for the water, kicking off my shoes as I went, and dove in without a second thought. The water was freezing, and Elijah was heavier than I expected, his strength completely gone from the panic and the cold. I grabbed him under his arms, using every bit of training I had to keep both our heads above water while pulling us toward the shallow end. My lungs burned, my arms shook, but I kept pulling, kept kicking, because in that moment I wasn't thinking about my job, my paycheck, or any of the warnings Bianca had given me. I was only thinking about keeping this man alive. By the time I got him to the edge, he was barely conscious, his lips tinged blue, his breathing shallow and uneven. I hauled him out with strength I didn't even know I had, laid him flat, and immediately started clearing his airway, tilting his head, checking his pulse the way I'd been trained 100 times before but never imagined I'd need in a moment like this. He coughed up water, his body convulsing, and I kept talking to him, telling him to stay with me, to keep breathing, that he wasn't going to die tonight, not like this, not because of her. It felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, before his breathing steadied and his eyes fluttered open, dazed and terrified, searching for something familiar. When he saw my face, something in him seemed to settle just slightly, like his body finally understood he was safe. I didn't waste time. I got him wrapped in dry towels, checked him for any signs of shock, and called for emergency medical support immediately, all while keeping him talking, keeping him conscious, keeping him with me. Once I knew he was stable enough, I helped move him inside to warmth, wrapping blankets around his shivering body, staying by his side every single second. It was hours later, once the paramedics had checked him over and confirmed he'd be okay with rest and monitoring, that he finally looked at me with clear eyes and said, "You didn't have to come back tonight." And I told him the truth. I know. But I'm glad I did. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as his nurse, not as staff, but as the person who chose to save his life when someone who claimed to love him chose to end it. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said something I never expected. "I think I started falling for you weeks ago. I was just too scared to admit it because everyone who's ever been close to me wanted something from me. You never asked for anything." Not once. My heart nearly stopped. I didn't know what to say, so I just held his hand a little tighter and told him softly, "I never wanted anything from you except for you to be okay." And in that moment, something between us shifted, quiet and real, the kind of thing that doesn't need big words or grand declarations, just presence, just truth. What neither of us mentioned out loud yet, but what I quietly understood, was that this wasn't over. Bianca had left him to die, believing there'd be no one left to tell the story. She didn't know I'd come back for my folder. She didn't know I'd witnessed everything. And most importantly, she didn't know that right before the ambulance arrived, Elijah still shaking, still recovering. had asked me to hand him his phone so he could make one very important call to the police, giving them every detail before she even had the chance to come back and see if her plan had worked. 2 days passed, and Elijah's condition improved steadily. I stayed close the entire time, monitoring his recovery, making sure he ate, rested, and slowly regained his strength. We talked more during those 2 days than we had in the entire month before, filling the silence with real conversations, real laughter, real comfort. He told me about his childhood, his dreams before the accident, his fears after it, and I found myself sharing pieces of my life, two things I hadn't told many people about growing up with very little. About choosing nursing because I wanted to be the person who showed up for people when no one else would. On the third day, Bianca returned to the house, completely unaware of what had unfolded. She walked in with her usual confidence, her heels clicking against the marble floor, expecting silence, expecting emptiness, expecting to finally be free of the man she saw as nothing more than a burden with a bank account. Instead, she found him sitting upright in the living room, alive, alert, and staring straight at her with a calm she clearly wasn't prepared for. Her face went pale. For a moment, she just stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth slightly open, trying to process what she was seeing. You're okay, she stammered, clearly searching for the right words to cover her shock, but Elijah didn't give her the chance to talk her way out of anything. I know what you did, he said quietly, his voice steady despite everything his body had been through. And so does the woman who saved my life, and so does the police. The color drained completely from her face. She took a step back, glancing toward the door, and in that split second I saw the truth hit her, the realization that her plan had failed completely. She turned and bolted toward the front entrance, her heels echoing frantically against the floor, desperate to get away before anything else could happen. But when she pulled the front door open, ready to run, she was met instead by two police officers standing right outside, having already been briefed on the entire situation from Elijah's earlier call. She barely had time to react before they stepped forward, informing her she was being detained for questioning regarding the incident at the pool. Her protests, her tears, her attempts to explain herself, none of it mattered anymore. The truth was already out, and there was no smiling her way out of this one. Watching her be led away, I didn't feel joy or triumph, just a quiet relief, and a strange kind of sadness for how far someone could fall chasing money instead of choosing love. In the weeks that followed, Elijah's family returned, shocked to hear everything that had happened while they were away. They thanked me endlessly, but more than that, I watched Elijah slowly become a different person, lighter, freer, like a weight had finally been lifted off him that had nothing to do with his legs at all. Our relationship grew naturally after that, without pressure, without rush, built on something Bianca never understood: real trust, real care, real partnership. Months later, in a small, quiet ceremony surrounded by the people who truly mattered, Elijah and I got married. Not in some huge, flashy event, but something simple, something honest, something that felt like us. Today, I still care for him every single day, not because it's my job anymore, but because it's my heart's choice. I help him with his therapy, I sit with him through hard days, and I remind him gently every single day that being loved has nothing to do with what you can give someone, and everything to do with who chooses to stay when it matters most. If this story touched your heart even a little, let me know in the comments. Would you have risked everything the way I did that night? Make sure you hit follow so you never miss the next story, and share this with someone who still believes real loyalty exists in this world, because it does. Sometimes it just shows up wearing scrubs, not diamonds.